The year is 2347. Humanity has spread across a dozen star systems, connected by a network of wormhole jump gates. Earth remains the capital, seat of the United Terran Federation. For decades, the Federation has been in a cold war with the Zorgax Imperium, an authoritarian alien civilization that views humans as upstart primates that need to be put in their place. Tensions are high, but open conflict has been avoided so far. That fragile peace is about to be shattered. In the Arcturon system on the border between human and Zorgax space, a Federation patrol fleet led by Captain Jenna Maxwell of the dreadnought UTS Indomitable encounters a massive Zorgax battle group, led by the fanatical Admiral Krovax. The Zorgax fleet is 3 times larger than the Federation's and contains several of their dreaded Planet Cracker siege ships. Krovax hails the human ships and declares that this system now belongs to the Imperium. He gives them one chance to surrender or withdraw. To punctuate the threat, the Zorgax blast one of Arcturon 3's moons to rubble with their weapons. Captain Maxwell knows she is outgunned but cannot just give up the system. She plays for time, hailing Krovax and requesting time to contact her superiors on Earth to discuss his demands. When the Terran President and Defense Council hear what has happened, they are shocked but not entirely surprised. They have long expected the Zorgax to make a move. The President addresses Krovax directly on an open channel. She warns him that the Federation will consider any further aggression an act of war. Earth does not want conflict but will not back down if challenged. She tells Krovax to withdraw or face the consequences. But the arrogant Zorgax Admiral laughs off the warning, taunting the President that the human insects are no match for the Imperium's might. As the transmission ends, Krovax gives Captain Maxwell a 1-hour ultimatum to surrender the Arcturon system or be destroyed. On Earth, the President and generals grimly prepare for what is to come. They had hoped to avoid a war, but the Zorgax have forced their hand. The survival of the Federation may be at stake. As the 1-hour deadline approached, Captain Maxwell knew she had to make a decision. Surrender was out of the question. It would only embolden the Zorgax to further aggression. But fighting alone against such odds would be suicide. She sent an urgent coded message back to Earth, outlining a daring plan. The Terran President, putting her faith in Maxwell's abilities, gave the order to proceed. Maxwell then hailed Krovax and informed him that the Federation would not surrender a single inch of space to the Imperium. If he wanted the Arcturon system, he would have to take it by force. Krovax smiled coldly, having expected and even hoped for such defiance. It would make his victory all the sweeter. With a single word, he ordered his fleet to attack. The Zorgax ships surged forward, their powerful cannons beginning to glow as they charged up to unleash devastation on the humans. But Captain Maxwell had one more card to play. She gave the command and suddenly, the Federation ships scattered in all directions at full speed. The Zorgax, caught off guard, tried to track them but the humans were too quick and too small a target. Admiral Krovax hesitated, suspecting a trick. His suspicion was confirmed a moment later when a series of massive explosions ripped through space all around his fleet. The humans had seeded the area with cloaked mines. The Zorgax shields held against the initial blasts but several ships were damaged and their formation was broken. Seizing the moment of confusion, Maxwell ordered the Federation fleet to circle back and concentrate their fire on the Zorgax capital ships. Krovax bellowed with rage, trying to rally his forces, but the humans were relentless. The Zorgax returned fire, their weapons tearing through several Federation craft. The UTS Defiant, Maxwell's second in command, took a direct hit and exploded in a blinding flash. The humans fought valiantly but were vastly outnumbered and outgunned. It was only a matter of time before they were overwhelmed. Just as all seemed lost, a massive burst of light erupted behind the Zorgax fleet and more ships emerged from hyperspace, but they were not Zorgax reinforcements. It was another Federation battle group, led by the carrier UTS Titan and the legendary Admiral Sokolov. Earth had received Maxwell's message and sent every ship they could spare. The tide of battle quickly turned as the reinforcements engaged the Zorgax. Admiral Kravix found his fleet caught between two human forces, his grand plans for conquest rapidly crumbling. Captain Maxwell seized the chance and took the Indomitable into a daring attack run, straight for Kravix's command ship. The Zorgax flagship was immense, bristling with weapons, and protected by the most advanced shields the Imperium possessed. It shrugged off the initial salvo from the Indomitable as if it were nothing. But Maxwell was just getting started. She directed all power to the shields and engines, pushing her ship to its limits in a high-stakes game of chicken with the alien dreadnought. Kravix realized her intentions too late. He tried to move his ship out of the way, but it was far too slow and cumbersome. With alarms blaring and sparks flying on her bridge, Captain Maxwell held her course, bracing for impact. The Indomitable, its hull groaning under the strain, slammed directly into the heart of the Zorgax flagship with the force of 1,000 suns. A blinding flash seared through space as the two titans collided and vanished in an expanding sphere of utter destruction. In the aftermath of the titanic explosion, a deathly silence fell over the battlefield. The Zorgax fleet, stunned by the loss of their flagship and admiral, fell into disarray. Some ships continued to fight, while others turned to flee. The Terran reinforcements, now led by Admiral Sokolov, pressed the attack, determined to break the Zorgax completely. Amidst the debris field where the Indomitable and the Zorgax flagship had collided, a miracle occurred. A small, battered shuttle emerged, making its way slowly towards the Titan. It was from the Indomitable, and it carried Captain Maxwell and a handful of her bridge crew. They had managed to eject just before the moment of impact. As the shuttle docked with the Titan, Maxwell was greeted as a hero by Sokolov and her fellow officers. Her daring sacrifice had turned the tide of the battle and possibly the entire war. But there was little time for celebration. The Zorgax were still a threat, and there were other pressing matters to attend to. Maxwell, though exhausted and injured, insisted on making a full report to Earth immediately. As she stood before the video link, the President and the entire Terran Council stood in solemn silence, listening to her account of the battle. When she had finished, the President spoke, her voice heavy with emotion. She commended Maxwell and her crew for their incredible bravery and sacrifice. She then turned to the matter of the Zorgax aggression. This unprovoked attack, she declared, could not go unanswered. The Terran Federation was now officially at war with the Zorgax Imperium. As the transmission ended, Maxwell felt a heavy weight settle on her shoulders. She had always known that this day might come, but the reality of it was still a shock. She looked out the viewport at the remnants of the battle, the twisted metal and flickering fires, and wondered how many more such scenes she would witness before this war was over. Back on Earth, news of the attack and the Terran victory spread like wildfire. The public, long anxious about the threat of the Zorgax, rallied behind the Federation leadership. Support for the war effort was unanimous and overwhelming. In the days that followed, the Federation mobilized like never before. Shipyards worked around the clock, churning out new warships and weapons. Research labs buzzed with activity as scientists raced to develop new technologies to counter the Zorgax. Recruitment centers were flooded with volunteers eager to join the fight. But even as the Federation prepared for total war, there were those who questioned whether it was a fight they could win. The Zorgax Imperium was vast, with resources that dwarfed those of the humans. They had been preparing for this conflict for decades, perhaps centuries. Did the Terrans really stand a chance? These doubts were put to rest by the President in a powerful address to the nation. She acknowledged the scale of the challenge before them but reminded her people of the indomitable human spirit. Throughout history, she said, humans had faced impossible odds and prevailed through courage, ingenuity, and sheer determination. This would be no different. The Terran Federation would stand united, and it would emerge victorious. As she spoke, Images of Captain Maxwell and her valiant crew were broadcast across the Federation, a symbol of human resilience and sacrifice. The captain, still recovering from her wounds, watched the address from her hospital bed, tears streaming down her face. She knew, better than anyone, the true cost of war. But she also knew that it was a price that had to be paid for the sake of their freedom and their future. The road ahead would be long and hard, but the Terran Federation would walk it with unwavering resolve. For in the face of tyranny and aggression, there could be no other choice. The Zorgax had started this war, but the humans would finish it, whatever the cost. Thus began the greatest conflict in human history, a struggle that would reshape the galaxy and test the mettle of humanity like never before. As the war between the Terran Federation and the Zorgax Imperium escalated, the true scale of the conflict became apparent. This was no mere border skirmish, it was a fight for survival, a struggle that would determine the fate of both civilizations. The initial clashes were fierce and bloody. The Zorgax, with their superior numbers and technology, made significant gains, pushing the Terran forces back on several fronts. Worlds that had been part of the Federation for generations fell under the brutal occupation of the Imperium. But the humans, though battered, did not break. Under the leadership of the newly promoted Admiral Maxwell and her mentor, Admiral Sokolov, they regrouped and adapted. They used their smaller size and greater agility to their advantage, striking the Zorgax supply lines and communication networks. On the home front, the war effort consumed every aspect of Terran society. Factories were retooled for military production, churning out ships, tanks, and weapons at an unprecedented rate. Research and development went into overdrive, with scientists and engineers working tirelessly to devise new ways to counter the Zorgax technological edge. The cost was steep, both in resources and in lives. As the casualty reports flooded in, every Terran family found itself touched by the war in some way. But rather than demoralizing the population, these losses only hardened their resolve. The sacrifices of the fallen were not in vain, they were the price of freedom. In the midst of this global effort, a new hero emerged. Lucas Foster, a brilliant young engineer, had been working on a secret project, a new type of weapon that could turn the tide of the war. It was a massive railgun, capable of launching projectiles at a fraction of the speed of light. When Admiral Maxwell learned of Foster's project, she immediately recognized its potential. She brought him into the fold, providing him with the resources and support he needed to complete his work. Foster and his team labored day and night, racing against the clock to bring the weapon online. Their breakthrough came just in time. The Zorgax, having consolidated their gains, were preparing for a massive offensive aimed at the heart of the Federation. If successful, it would cut the humans in half and pave the way for total conquest. The target was the Vega system, a crucial hub for Terran logistics and communication. The Zorgax assembled an immense armada, the largest ever seen, and began their inexorable advance. The fate of the Federation hung in the balance. Admiral Maxwell, anticipating the attack, gathered every ship she could muster and set out to meet the Zorgax head-on. It was a desperate gamble, but there was no choice. If Vega fell, so would the Federation. As the two fleets converged, the scale of the impending battle became clear. The Zorgax outnumbered the Terrans 3-1, and their ships bristled with fearsome weapons. But Maxwell had a secret weapon of her own, Foster's railgun, now installed on her flagship, the UTS Titan. The battle began with a furious exchange of long-range fire, the void of space lit up by countless energy beams and missile trails. Ships on both sides were destroyed or crippled, but neither fleet gave ground. Then, as the range closed, Maxwell gave the order to fire the railgun. The effect was devastating. The hypersonic projectile, accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed, tore through the Zorgax formation like a bolt of lightning. Ships were shattered, shields overloaded, hulls punctured. The Zorgax, caught completely off guard, fell into disarray. Seizing the moment, Maxwell ordered a full attack. The Terran fleet surged forward, pouring fire into the disorganized Zorgax. It was a turning point, a moment of hope amidst the darkness of war. But the Zorgax were far from defeated, and they quickly regrouped. The battle raged on, each side taking heavy losses. It was a fight of attrition, a desperate struggle for survival. And it was far from over. As the battle for Vega reached its climax, the Terran fleet found itself in a precarious position. Despite the initial success of the railgun, the Zorgax had adapted their tactics, focusing their fire on the Titan in an attempt to eliminate the threat. The Terran flagship was taking a beating, its shields barely holding under the onslaught. On the bridge, Admiral Maxwell gritted her teeth as another explosion rocked the ship. Damage reports flooded in, painting a grim picture. The railgun was overheating, the engines were failing, and life support was on the verge of collapse. But Maxwell refused to give the order to retreat. Too much was at stake. In the heart of the ship, Lucas Foster and his team worked frantically to keep the railgun operational. They had pushed the weapon beyond its design limits, and it was starting to take its toll. Foster knew that one more shot could burn out the entire system, leaving them defenseless. But he also knew that one more shot could turn the tide of the battle. As the Zorgax closed in for the kill, Maxwell made a decision. She ordered all power diverted to the railgun for one final shot. The lights on the bridge dimmed, the engines sputtered and died. The Titan was now a sitting duck, completely vulnerable. But if this worked, it would all be worth it. Foster initiated the firing sequence, the railgun humming with barely contained energy. The ship shuddered as the enormous recoil kicked in, the projectile hurtling towards the Zorgax flagship at near light speed. It was a shot in a million, a desperate gamble. Time seemed to slow as the projectile crossed the vast distances of space. Every eye on the bridge was glued to the view screen, watching its progress. The Zorgax ship loomed larger and larger, a behemoth of metal and weaponry. And then, the impossible happened. The projectile found its mark, punching through the Zorgax shields as if they were paper. It tore through the ship from stem to stern, igniting its reactor core in a blinding flash of light. The flagship disintegrated, consumed by a massive explosion that sent shockwaves through the entire Zorgax formation. For a moment, there was silence on the bridge of the Titan. Then, a cheer went up as the realization sank in. They had done it. Against all odds, they had struck a decisive blow against the Zorgax. The tide of the battle, and perhaps the war, had turned. But the victory had come at a great cost. The Titan was dead in space, its systems fried by the railgun's power surge. Many other Terran ships had been lost or crippled in the fighting. The fleet had held the line, but only just. In the aftermath of the battle, as the Terran ships limped back to friendly space for repairs and rearmament, the true impact of their achievement began to sink in. News of the victory at Vega spread like wildfire across the Federation, sparking celebrations and renewed hope. For the first time since the war began, it seemed that the Zorgax could be beaten. But Admiral Maxwell, ever the realist, knew that this was just the beginning. The Zorgax would not take this defeat lightly. They would regroup, rearm, and come back stronger than ever. The war was far from over. As she stood on the bridge of the battered Titan, looking out at the stars, Maxwell made a silent vow. She would not rest until the Zorgax threat was eliminated, once and for all. No matter the cost, no matter the sacrifice, she would see this through to the end. For she knew, as did every man and woman under her command, that this was more than just a war. It was a fight for the very survival of humanity, a struggle for the right to exist in a hostile universe. And in that fight, there could be no surrender, no compromise. The road ahead would be long and hard, filled with untold challenges and hardships. But the Terran Federation would meet those challenges head-on, united in their determination to prevail. For in the end, it was not the size of their fleet or the power of their weapons that would decide the outcome, but the strength of their spirit, the depth of their courage, and the unbreakable bonds of their fellowship. And with that knowledge, that faith in each other and in their cause, they would face the future, come what may. In the wake of the victory at Vega, the Terran Federation found itself at a crossroads. The Zorgax had been dealt a major blow, but they were far from defeated. Admiral Maxwell knew that the next move would be crucial. It was time to take the fight to the enemy. The Terran High Command, bolstered by the success at Vega, greenlit a daring plan, a deep strike into Zorgax territory, aimed at their main production facilities. If successful, it would cripple the Imperium's ability to wage war and force them to the negotiating table. But it was a risky gamble. The Zorgax heartland was heavily defended, bristling with fortifications and patrolled by their most elite units. Any attack would face fierce resistance and heavy casualties. Admiral Maxwell, undaunted by the odds, volunteered to lead the mission. She handpicked a strike force of the Federation's best ships and crews, including the newly repaired Titan and her old friend, Admiral Sokolov. As they prepared for the mission, news arrived that cast a pall over the proceedings. Lucas Foster, the brilliant engineer who had designed the railgun, had been killed in a Zorgax raid on his research facility. It was a bitter blow, a reminder of the price they were all paying in this war. Maxwell, though grieved by Foster's loss, knew that the best way to honor his memory was to complete the mission he had made possible. With grim determination, the strike force set out, plunging deep into enemy space. The journey was perilous, with the fleet constantly dodging Zorgax patrols and running the gauntlet of their defenses. They suffered losses, but Maxwell's tactical brilliance and the skill of her crews saw them through. Finally, they reached their target, a massive industrial complex, the heart of the Zorgax war machine. The attack began with a massive bombardment from the railguns, tearing through the facility's shields and turning its surface installations to molten slag. But the Zorgax were far from helpless. From hidden bunkers and shielded hangars, scores of fighters and battleships emerged, swarming the Terran fleet like angry hornets. The space around the complex became a cauldron of fire and death, with ships on both sides mauled and destroyed. In the midst of this chaos, Admiral Sokolov's ship was hit by a barrage of Zorgax missiles. The old warrior, never one to abandon a fight, ordered his crew to evacuate while he stayed behind to cover their retreat. Maxwell, tears in her eyes, could only watch as Sokolov's ship, engines blazing in one final act of defiance, rammed into a Zorgax dreadnought, taking it with him into oblivion. Sokolov's sacrifice bought the time needed to complete the mission. With the defenses in disarray, Maxwell ordered a full assault on the complex's core. Terran Marines, the best of the best, stormed the facility, engaging in brutal close-quarters combat with the Zorgax defenders. It was a bloody, desperate struggle, but the Terrans prevailed. They planted explosives at critical junctures and fought their way back to the ships. As the fleet withdrew, the charges detonated, setting off a chain reaction that tore the heart out of the Zorgax war industry. It was a magnificent victory, but one that came at a terrible cost. The Terran fleet limped home, battered and bloodied, mourning the loss of brave comrades and friends. But they had struck a blow that would resound across the galaxy. In the aftermath, as the Federation celebrated and the Zorgax reeled, Admiral Maxwell reflected on all that had happened. The war had taken a toll on her, physically and emotionally. But she knew that it was a toll she would gladly pay again if needed. For she had seen, in the bravery and sacrifice of her comrades, the true strength of the human spirit. It was a strength that no weapon could match, no enemy could conquer. It was the strength that would carry them through to victory, no matter how long the road or how steep the cost. And with that knowledge, that unshakable faith, Admiral Maxwell looked to the future, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The strike on the Zorgax industrial complex marked a turning point in the war. With their production capabilities crippled, the Imperium's advance ground to a halt. For the first time, the Terran Federation had the upper hand. Admiral Maxwell, now the undisputed hero of the Federation, pressed the advantage. Under her leadership, Terran forces launched a series of daring raids and counterattacks, pushing the Zorgaks back on all fronts. Slowly but surely, the tide of the war began to turn. But the Zorgaks, though weakened, were not yet defeated. In a desperate gamble, they massed their remaining forces for a final, all-out assault on Earth itself. It was a move born of desperation and hubris, a belief that if they could decapitate the Federation leadership, the humans would crumble. The Terran High Command, anticipating this move, prepared a trap. As the Zorgaks' fleet approached Earth, they found not a helpless target, but a fully prepared defense led by Admiral Maxwell herself. The resulting battle was the largest and most brutal of the entire war. Ships on both sides were destroyed by the dozens as the fleets clashed in the skies over humanity's homeworld. The Zorgaks, driven by desperation, fought with a ferocity that bordered on madness. But the Terrans, fighting for their very survival, matched them blow for blow. In the end, it was the resilience and determination of the human spirit that prevailed. The Zorgaks' fleet, exhausted and depleted, finally broke under the relentless Terran assault. Those ships that could, fled. Those that couldn't were systematically destroyed. It was a victory that would echo through the ages, a triumph of courage and resolve over impossible odds. But it was not without its price. Thousands of brave Terran soldiers and spacers had given their lives in defense of their home and their way of life. Cities on Earth lay in ruins, scarred by the fierce ground battles that had raged in their streets. In the aftermath, as the Federation began the long process of rebuilding, Admiral Maxwell found herself at the center of a new challenge. The Zorgaks, their military shattered and their leadership in disarray, had sued for peace. It fell to Maxwell and her team to negotiate the terms of the surrender. It was a delicate balancing act, a test of Maxwell's diplomatic skills as much as her military prowess. The Terrans, after so much sacrifice, were in no mood for leniency. There were calls for the total annexation of Zorgak space, for reparations that would cripple their economy for generations. But Maxwell, with the wisdom born of battle and loss, knew that such a course would only sow the seeds of future conflict. She sought instead a peace that was just but not vindictive, a settlement that would allow both sides to rebuild and move forward. In the end, her vision prevailed. The Zorgaks, chastened and humbled, accepted the terms. They withdrew from all occupied Terran worlds and paid significant but not crushing war reparations. In return, the Federation agreed to respect the integrity of Zorgak space and to establish regular diplomatic relations. It was not a perfect peace, but it was a start. As the treaty was signed and the guns fell silent, a sense of hope began to spread across the galaxy. For the first time in generations, there was a chance for a new beginning, for a future free from the shadow of war. And at the heart of it all was Admiral Jenna Maxwell, the hero who had led humanity through its darkest hour. She had given everything to the cause of freedom, her ship, her crew, her friends, and nearly her life. But she had emerged victorious, a shining beacon of the indomitable human spirit. As she stood on the deck of her new flagship, looking out at the stars that were now at peace, Maxwell allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. She thought of all those who had given their lives, of the sacrifices that had been made. She thought of Lucas Foster and Admiral Sokolov, of the countless others who had fought and died so that humanity might live. And she made a silent promise, to herself and to their memory, that their sacrifice would not be in vain. That she would dedicate the rest of her life to preserving the peace they had won, to building a galaxy where all species could live in harmony and prosperity. It was a daunting task, but one that Admiral Jenna Maxwell was more than ready to face. For she knew, with an unshakable certainty, that there was no challenge too great, no odds too steep, for the united will of a free and determined people. And with that knowledge, that quiet confidence, she set a course for the future, ready to meet whatever lay ahead.